Chapter 1. The Bruises candle had burned too low again. Elara watched the flame gutter and twist in its brass holder, casting shadows that crawled up the stone walls of Lord Cassian's study like living things. She should have replaced it an hour ago before the wax pooled black at the base, before the light grew thin enough that he might notice her standing there, frozen, with the silver tray trembling in her hands. But she had hesitated. And hesitation, in a house like this, was dangerous. "You're late." His voice came from the corner, draped in velvet darkness, smooth as wine poured over glass. Elara's breath caught, though she'd known he was there, had felt his presence the moment she'd crossed the threshold. The way one felt a storm gathering on the horizon. "I apologize, my lord." She kept her eyes on the tray, fresh candles, a sealed letter. The evening's correspondence arranged just as he preferred. Her voice came out steady, a small mercy. The kitchen was "come here," to words, not a request. Elara's feet moved before her mind could catch up, carrying her across the Persian rug that swallowed sound, past the mahogany desk carved with symbols she didn't understand, toward the figure that sat motionless in the high-backed chair. Lord Cassian Thorne, master of Blackwater Estate, head of House Thorne, one of the 4 ruling vampire houses that governed the city's night. She'd worked in his household for 3 months. 3 months of learning to move through corridors where servants whispered and vanished, where certain rooms remained locked, where the Lord himself rarely appeared before sunset. 3 months of averting her eyes, keeping her questions locked behind her teeth, pretending not to notice the way he never touched food, never cast a proper reflection in the hallway mirrors, never seemed to breathe. The other servants had warned her on her first day, "Do your work. Don't ask questions. Never look him in the eye." She'd needed the position to desperately to refuse. Now, as she approached, Cassian shifted forward into the candlelight, and Elara's hands tightened on the tray. He was beautiful in the way ancient cathedrals were beautiful, cold, severe, carved from something that predated mercy. Dark hair fell across a pale forehead, framing features too sharp to be entirely human. His eyes, when they lifted to her face, were the color of smoke and steel. Those eyes narrowed. "Set it down." Elara lowered the tray onto the desk with trembling care, the silver catching lamplight. She stepped back immediately, 1 pace, then 2, but his hand moved faster than sight, catching her wrist before she could retreat. His grip was gentle, impossibly gentle, and cold enough to burn. Who did this? Elara's heart stopped. She'd been so careful. Long sleeves despite the summer heat, high collars, even when the other maids laughed at her modesty. She'd learned to move her left arm naturally, to carry trays without flinching, to hide the mottled purple-black fingerprints that encircled her forearm like a brand. But Cassian's thumb had found the edge of her sleeve, had pushed it back just enough to reveal what she'd spent weeks concealing. "It's nothing, my lord." The lie tasted like ash. "I'm clumsy. I fell." "Don't." His voice dropped to something darker, something that made the candle flames shiver. "I can smell the lie on you like spoiled blood." He released her wrist, but didn't look away. In the guttering light, his face had gone utterly still, carved from marble and winter. Elara wanted to run, wanted to apologize, explain, beg him not to dismiss her. She had nowhere else to go, no family to return to, no references that would open other doors. Instead, she stood frozen as Cassian rose from his chair. He was taller than she'd realized, broad-shouldered beneath the black coat that seemed to drink the light around it. He moved around the desk with a predator's fluid grace, each step deliberate, until he stood close enough that she could smell him, old parchment and night-blooming jasmine, and something darker, something that made her hindbrain scream danger. "Show me, my lord. Please show me, Elara." He knew her name. In 3 months of service, he'd never used it. Her hands shook as she pushed up her sleeve, revealing the full extent of the damage. The bruises had faded from their initial angry purple to a sickly yellow-green, but the pattern was unmistakable. 4 fingers and a thumb, wrapped completely around her arm. Too large to be her own grip, too deliberate to be an accident. Cassian stared at the marks for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft as falling ash. "The head footman, Marcus." It wasn't a question. Elara's silence was answer enough. Something changed in the room, a shift in pressure, in temperature, in the quality of the shadows themselves. The candle flames bent sideways as if caught in an impossible wind. Cassian's eyes, when they lifted to hers, had darkened to something that belonged to lightless depths, to places where mercy had never learned to grow. "You will not see him again," he said quietly. Do you understand? Please, my lord, don't dismiss me. I need this position. I have nowhere. I'm not dismissing you. His hand rose, and Elara flinched before she could stop herself. He froze. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then Cassian lowered his hand slowly, deliberately, his expression unreadable. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of something ancient, something bound by rules she didn't understand. No one touches what is mine. Not without consequence. He stepped past her toward the door, coat swirling like smoke. At the threshold, he paused without turning. Go to your room, Elara. Lock the door. Don't open it until sunrise, regardless of what you hear. Then he was gone. And the candles burned steady again, and Elara stood alone in the study with her bruises and her questions and the terrible certainty that she had just set something irreversible into motion, outside. In the darkness beyond the estate's walls, the city's church bells began to toll midnight, and somewhere in the servants' quarters, Marcus was about to learn why House Thorne had ruled this city's shadows for 300 years. Chapter 2. The worn-in-Elara didn't sleep. She sat on the narrow bed in her attic room, knees drawn to her chest, watching the moonlight crawl across the floorboards. The lock on her door was turned, as Lord Cassian had commanded, but it felt flimsy now, a child's protection against something vast and incomprehensible, outside. The estate had gone silent, not the ordinary silence of sleeping households, where floorboards creaked and wind rattled windows and mice skittered behind walls. This was the silence of held breath, of prey frozen in tall grass, of the moment before lightning struck. Even the night birds had stopped singing. Elara pressed her bruised arm against her chest and tried not to think about Marcus's face. Tried not to remember the night 2 weeks ago when he'd cornered her in the wine cellar, his breath sour with drink, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave marks that still hadn't faded. She'd gotten away barely, but the threat had lingered in every passing glance. Every time she'd found herself alone in a corridor. And "No one touches what is mine." The words circled in her mind like ravens. She wasn't naive enough to mistake them for kindness. Lord Cassian was no hero from a penny novel, no gentleman riding to a maiden's rescue. He was something else entirely, something the other servants whispered about in corners, crossing themselves when they thought no one was watching. The vampires of the 4 houses ruled the city after dark. Everyone knew it, even if the knowledge was never spoken aloud in daylight. House Thorne, House Vesper, House Corvus, House Blackwell, ancient bloodlines bound by laws older than the cobblestone streets, older than the cathedral spires that pierced the sky. They kept their own courts, settled their own disputes, and expected humans to know their place, which made Cassian's words even more terrifying. What is mine?As if she were property. A possession worth defending. Elara's fingers found the small crucifix at her throat, her mother's, the only inheritance she'd carried from her old life. She'd stopped believing it offered any real protection months ago, but touching it steadied her hands. The church bells tolled 1, then footsteps. They came up the servants' staircase, slow and deliberate, each one distinct in the suffocating quiet. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. The footsteps paused outside her door. A knock. 3 times, measured. Miss Elara, a woman's voice, elderly and firm. It's Mrs. Aldrich. Open the door, please. The housekeeper. Elara exhaled shakily and crossed to the door, turning the lock with numb fingers. Mrs. Aldrich stood in the dim corridor, her gray hair pulled back severely, her face carved from granite and propriety. In her hands, she carried a bundle of dark fabric. His lordship requires your presence in the main hall, Mrs. Aldrich said. Her expression gave nothing away, but her eyes sharp as a hawk's held something that might have been warning. Or pity. You're to dress appropriately and come at once. Elara's mouth went dry. What's happened? That's not for me to say, Mrs. Aldrich thrust the bundle forward. Quickly now. Don't keep him waiting. The fabric was a dress, simple black wool, but finer than anything Elara had worn since her family's fall from grace. She changed mechanically, her fingers clumsy on the buttons, while Mrs. Aldrich waited with the patience of stone. When Elara emerged, the housekeeper nodded once and turned down the corridor. Stay close to me, she murmured. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you see, remember that House Thorne has protected this estate for 3 centuries. There are reasons we survive. The words should have been reassuring. They weren't. They descended through the sleeping house, past the servants' quarters, and into the grand sections where Elara rarely ventured. The corridors grew wider, the ceilings higher, the air colder. Portraits of pale-faced nobles watched their passage with painted eyes that seemed to follow. Elara recognized some of them from the genealogy books she'd dusted in the library, thorns stretching back through centuries, their faces all bearing the same sharp features, the same ageless beauty, the same eyes as Lord Cassian. The main hall waited at the estate's heart, a cavernous space of marble columns and vaulted ceilings where the family once held court. Now it stood empty except for the figure at its center. Cassian stood beneath the crystal chandelier, hands clasped behind his back, perfectly still. He'd removed his coat. His white shirt gleamed like bone in the darkness, unstained and pristine. At his feet lay something crumpled and motionless. Marcus. Elara's breath strangled in her throat. The footman wasn't dead. She could see the shallow rise and fall of his chest, but he'd been broken with surgical precision. His nose sat at an unnatural angle. His left arm bent wrong. Blood had dried in dark streaks across his face, and his eyes, when they rolled toward her in desperate recognition, were wide with animal terror. Elara. Cassian's voice carried perfectly across the marble expanse. Come here, Mrs. Aldrich's hand touched her shoulder blade, a gentle push. Elara's feet carried her forward on their own, each step echoing like a gunshot. She stopped 3 paces from Cassian, close enough to see Marcus trembling, close enough to smell the copper-sweet scent of blood. Cassian didn't look at her. His eyes remained fixed on the broken man at his feet. Do you know what the first law states? He asked quietly. The oldest rule of House Thorne, written when this city was nothing but fishing villages and plague pits. Elara shook her head mutely. Those who serve are owed protection. Cassian's tone remained conversational, almost gentle. Not kindness, not friendship, but protection. It's a blood oath. Every lord of House Thorne swears upon ascension that no servant under our roof shall be harmed by any hand, mortal or immortal, without consequence. He finally turned to face her, and the candlelight caught in his eyes, turning them briefly red as old wine. Marcus violated that law. He put his hands on you, left marks. A pause, waited. That debt requires payment. My lord. Elara's voice came out as barely a whisper. Please. He's learned his lesson. Let him go. I have. Cassian gestured toward Marcus. He lives. That itself is mercy. But he will carry the memory of what happens when House Thorne's protection is challenged. He stepped closer to Elara, his presence overwhelming in the vast space. And so will everyone else in this household. He raised his hand, the same hand that had caught her wrist so gently hours before, and she saw his fingers were clean, unmarked. Whatever he'd done to Marcus, he'd done it without leaving a trace on himself. You need not fear him again, Cassian said softly, or anyone else. You are under House Thorne's protection now. Do you understand what that means? Elara stared up at him, at this creature who looked like a man, but moved like winter wind, who spoke of mercy while a broken body lay at his feet. No, she whispered. I don't understand anything. Something flickered across Cassian's face, too quick to name, gone before she could catch it. You will, he said. Then louder. Mrs. Aldrich. Remove him. See that he's treated and sent away by dawn. He is banned from these grounds in perpetuity. The housekeeper materialized with 2 footmen, who hauled Marcus's whimpering form away. Cassian watched them go, his expression unreadable, before turning back to Elara. You should sleep. Tomorrow night, we have much to discuss. Tomorrow night? The words escaped before Elara could stop them. Yes. A slight smile touched his mouth, cold and sharp as broken glass. There are things you need to know about this house. About what you've stepped into simply by being here. And about why rival houses will soon come knocking at our gates looking for weakness. He moved past her toward the shadows, his footsteps silent on marble. Sleep well, Elara, while you still can. Then he was gone, and Elara stood alone in the vast hall, with the chandelier's crystal tears catching moonlight, and the slowly drying bloodstains, and the terrible understanding that her life had just become infinitely more complicated, and infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 3. The invitation morning came with fog thick as wool. Elara moved through her duties like a ghost, polishing silver that didn't need polishing, dusting shelves already immaculate. The other servants gave her a wide berth, not hostile, but cautious, as if she'd been marked by something they didn't want to touch. News of Marcus's banishment had spread through the household like wildfire. No one spoke of it directly, but Elara caught the sideways glances, the conversations that died when she entered. Rooms. Mrs. Aldrich found her in the library shortly after noon. His lordship wishes to see you in his private study. Sunset. The housekeeper's expression was unreadable. Wear the gray dress I've laid on your bed. And Elara, she paused at the doorway. Whatever he tells you tonight, listen carefully. Lord Cassian does not waste words. The gray dress was silk, not wool. Simple in cut, but unmistakably fine, with pearl buttons and a high collar that covered her bruises completely. Elara stared at it for a long moment, running her fingers over fabric that cost more than she'd earned in a year. This wasn't a maid's uniform. This was something else. Those who serve are owed protection. She dressed as the sun began its descent, watching through her window as shadows lengthened across the estate grounds. The gardens looked different in the dying light, the hedges sharper, the statues more watchful, the fountains stone angels poised as if ready to take flight or attack. When the church bells tolled 6, Elara made her way down to the Lord's private study, not the formal room where she'd brought the candles last night, but a smaller chamber in the estate's oldest wing. She'd never been summoned here before. Few servants had. She knocked 3 times. Enter. Cassian stood by the window, silhouetted against the twilight. He'd changed into dark clothing that seemed to absorb the fading light, and his hair was tied back, revealing the sharp architecture of his face. Without turning, he spoke. Do you know the history of this house, Elara? She hesitated in the doorway. I know it's old, my lord. 3 centuries, as you said. 347 years. He turned, and his eyes caught the lamplight. My grandfather built it with his own hands, or rather, with human hands he paid in gold and protection. An agreement. They would build. And House Thorne would ensure their families were never touched by the other houses, never hunted, never drained dry and left in alleys. Elara's fingers tightened on her skirt. Drained dry. The words hung in the air like smoke. Cassian gestured to a chair near the fireplace. Sit. We have much to discuss, and standing on ceremony wastes time we don't have. She sat carefully, perched on the edge of velvet cushions that smelled of old wood and something darker, something she was beginning to recognize as distinctly him. Cassian took the chair opposite, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You've been in this house 3 months, he said. You've kept your head down, asked no questions, pretended not to notice things that would terrify most mortals. That kind of willful blindness is either remarkable stupidity or remarkable desperation. A pause. Which is it? Elara met his eyes, breaking the cardinal rule every servant knew, and was surprised when he didn't look away. Desperation, my lord. Good. Honesty. He leaned back. Then let me be equally honest. You were hired because you had nowhere else to go. Your father's gambling debts destroyed your family's name. Your mother died of shame and fever. You have no siblings, no prospects, no references worth the paper they're written on. You came to my door because you were starving. Each word landed like a stone. Elara's throat tightened, but she forced herself to keep breathing. Yes, my lord, and now you've caught the attention of House Thorne's lord. Cassian's voice dropped lower. Which means you've caught the attention of the other houses as well. They watch this estate constantly, looking for weaknesses, for leverage, for any excuse to challenge our territory. Last night, when I defended you, I sent a message. Elara Ashford is under my protection. I didn't ask for that. No, but you have it nonetheless. He stood, moving to a side table where crystal decanters caught the firelight. He poured dark wine into a single glass, and returned, offering it to her. Drink. You're pale as death. Elara took the glass with trembling hands. The wine was rich and deep, warming her from the inside. Cassian watched her drink with an expression she couldn't decipher. What do you know about vampires, Elara? The question hung between them. She set the glass down carefully. Stories, legends, that you drink blood to survive, that you can't enter homes uninvited, that sunlight burns you, and she faltered, and we're monsters. He said it matter-of-factly. Yes, some of us are. But House Thorne has laws older than most mortal kingdoms. We feed, yes, but by consent, from those who offer willingly in exchange for gold or protection or the small immortality of being remembered. We do not hunt. We do not slaughter. His eyes hardened. The other houses are not so. Restrained. Elara's hands had gone cold, despite the wine. Why are you telling me this? Because House Vesper has noticed you. The name dropped like ice water down her spine. Even she had heard whispers of House Vesper, the rival bloodline that controlled the city's eastern territories, that left drained bodies in its wake, that considered humans little more than livestock. Cassian's jaw tightened. 3 nights ago, one of their scouts was seen on our grounds. Last night, after the incident with Marcus, they sent a formal inquiry asking about the mortal who'd earned House Thorne's protection. He moved to the window, looking out at the darkening grounds. They're testing boundaries, seeing if I'll defend you when the cost grows higher. Then send me away. The words burst out before Elara could stop them. I'll leave tonight. Go to another city. Somewhere they'd find you within a week. Cassian cut her off. You're marked now. My blood oath is public record among the houses. Breaking it would be seen as weakness, and weakness invites war. He turned back to her, and something in his expression had shifted, become almost vulnerable. I won't send you to your death, not when I put the target on your back. Elara stood on shaking legs. Then what do? You stay here, in the main house, not the servants' quarters. You learn our ways, how to move through vampire society without causing offense, how to recognize the signs of each house, how to protect yourself if I'm not present. He crossed to her, and his nearness made her breath catch. And you decide whether you can trust me enough to survive what's coming. What is coming? War, possibly. His voice was soft as falling ash. House Vesper has been pushing boundaries for months. They want our territory, our feeding rights, our seat on the Night Council. If they can prove House Thorne wastes resources protecting mortals. He didn't finish the sentence. Elara's mind raced. 3 months ago, she'd been worried about finding her next meal, about keeping a roof over her head. Now she stood in silk and firelight, discussing vampire politics and blood oaths and impending war with a creature who should terrify her. Should, but didn't, not entirely. Why me? She whispered. Why defend a servant? You could have any because you flinched. Cassian's hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touch the collar of her dress where it hid her bruises. When I reached for you last night, you flinched. As if you expected me to strike you. His fingers dropped. I've lived 3 centuries, Elara. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've watched mortals kill each other over scraps while claiming divine right. But I've never. He stopped, something raw flickering across his face. I've never broken the old laws. Those under my roof are safe. That's not negotiable. The firelight caught in his eyes, turning them briefly molten. So I'm asking you now, while you still have a choice, will you stay? Will you let me teach you how to survive this world? Or would you rather I give you gold and horses and send you as far as my influence reaches, knowing it might not be far enough? Elara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected beneath the cold beauty and predatory grace. Loneliness. The kind that came from centuries of keeping everyone at arm's length, of being feared rather than known. She thought of the empty roads beyond the estate, the cities where she had no name, no protection, no future. And she thought of the way Cassian had said, what is mine, not with possession, but with something almost like responsibility. I'll stay, she heard herself say. Teach me. Something shifted in Cassian's expression, relief perhaps, or satisfaction. He nodded once. Then we begin tonight. First lesson. In my world, names have power. You'll call me Cassian, not my lord. Formality creates distance, and distance will get you killed. Cassian, she tested. The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. Better. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Elara, from this moment forward, you are no longer a servant in this house. You are my ward, under my direct protection. That means you answer to no one but me. Understood? She nodded mutely. Good, Mrs. Aldrich is preparing chambers for you in the East Wing. Go, rest. Tomorrow night, your real education begins. Elara turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the threshold. Elara? Thank you. She looked back, confused. For what? For not running. His smile was slight, almost sad. Most would have. Then he turned back to the window, and Elara slipped into the corridor, her heart pounding with something that wasn't quite fear anymore, but wasn't quite safety either. Chapter 4. The Lesanthe East Wing chambers were a world apart. From the attic room where Elara had spent 3 months sleeping on a narrow cot, a 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in midnight blue velvet. Tall windows overlooked the gardens, their glass so old it warped the moonlight into strange patterns. A writing desk stood in one corner, already stocked with paper and ink, and on the wardrobe Elara opened it with trembling hands hung dresses. in deep jewel tones, far finer than anything she'd owned even before her family's fall. Mrs. Aldrich appeared in the doorway as if summoned by thought. "Everything fits," the housekeeper said, not quite a question. "His lordship has an eye for such things. 3 centuries of observing mortals teaches one to judge measurements at a glance." Elara touched the silk of a burgundy gown. "This is too much. I can't possibly." "You can. You must." Mrs. Aldrich's voice was firm. "You're no longer below stairs, girl. You'll be seen with Lord Cassian, perhaps even presented to other houses. You'll dress the part or bring shame to House Thorne." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "He's protecting you the only way he knows how, by making you untouchable. Don't waste it." After Mrs. Aldrich left, Elara stood at the window and watched the gardens shift in the wind. Untouchable, protected, ward. The words felt like a costume that didn't quite fit, but she was wearing it nonetheless. A knock came at midnight. Cassian stood in the corridor, dressed in black, with a dark cloak over one shoulder. In the lamplight, he looked like something from an old painting, ageless and otherworldly. "Come," he said. "Your first lesson begins now." He led her through corridors she'd never walked, down staircases that spiraled deep into the earth, until they reached a door bound in iron and carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Cassian pressed his palm against the metal, and the door swung open silently. Beyond lay a library, but not like the one above stairs, where Elara had dusted books about agriculture and estate management. This library breathed with age. Shelves climbed toward vaulted ceilings, packed with leather-bound volumes and scrolls yellow with time. The air smelled of parchment and something else, dried herbs, maybe, or very old blood. "The archive of House Thorne," Cassian said, watching her face. "Every blood oath, every treaty, every law written since my grandfather's time. Some of these books predate this city. Some predate the English language." He moved to a table where several volumes lay open, their pages covered in spidery script. "This is where you'll learn to survive." Elara approached slowly. The nearest book showed what looked like a family tree, but the names were written in crimson ink that seemed to shimmer. "What am I looking at?" "The 4 houses." Cassian's finger traced the branches. "House Thorne, House Vesper, House Corvus, House Blackwell. We're not related by blood, we're related by ancient pact. 4 original vampires who claimed this city, when it was barely more than a trading post, who agreed to divide territory and feeding rights to prevent eternal war." He turned pages, revealing maps marked with boundaries, contracts signed in elaborate script. Each house has its philosophy. House Thorne values protection and ancient law. "We feed from willing donors, maintain human servants, keep the old ways." House Corvus controls the merchant districts. They're pragmatists, businessmen, relatively peaceful. His finger moved to another section. House Blackwell runs the western docks, brutal, but honorable in their way. They'll keep their word once given. His hand stopped at the final section, and his voice hardened. House Vesper. The page showed a crest, a crescent moon dripping blood. "They believe humans exist to serve vampire needs, nothing more. They hunt, they drain, they view our feeding laws as weakness." He looked at Elara. "And they've been watching this estate for weeks, looking for leverage." Elara's throat was dry. "Because of me. Because of what you represent." A mortal elevated beyond her station, protected by blood oath, living in the Lord's own wing. Cassian closed the book. "To House Vesper, that's an insult. It suggests humans have value beyond their blood." He turned to face her fully. "So they'll test you, test me, try to force a mistake that breaks the pact. How? By sending an envoy. Tomorrow night, House Vesper will request a formal meeting when they're entitled to under treaty law. They'll come here, to this house, and they'll expect to see you." His eyes held hers. "You'll need to know how to behave in their presence. What to say, what never to say. How to show respect without showing weakness." Elara's hands had gone cold. "I don't know anything about vampire court etiquette. That's why we're here." Cassian moved to the center of the room, gesturing for her to follow. "First rule, never look away first. In our world, breaking eye contact is submission. You hold their gaze until they release you, or until I intervene." He stepped closer, and Elara forced herself not to retreat. His eyes caught the lamplight, not quite human, not quite anything she had a name for. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She did. Silver and smoke, and something that seemed to shift like fog. Seconds stretched, her pulse hammered in her ears. Every instinct screamed to look down, away, anywhere but into those ancient eyes. "Good," Cassian murmured. "You're stronger than you think." he stepped back. Second rule: never offer your hand first. Physical contact between houses requires permission. If Lord Vesper or his heir extends a hand, you may take it briefly but never initiate. What if they try to touch me otherwise? They won't, not with me present. His voice dropped to something dangerous. But if we're separated, if you find yourself alone with any vampire outside this house you run, you scream, you fight. Understand? Elara nodded, her mouth too dry for words. Third rule: never discuss feeding. Never ask questions about it. Never show curiosity. Never acknowledge it's happening, even if you see evidence. Cassian began to pace, his movements restless. To them, it would be like livestock asking about slaughter. Some things are beneath notice. But you said House Thorne only feeds from willing donors. We do. But House Vesper doesn't distinguish between willing and unwilling. To them, human choices, irrelevant. He stopped pacing, shadows pooling around him. Which is why they find our methods offensive. Weakness masquerading as honor. Elara absorbed this, trying to organize the flood of information into something usable. What do they want from tomorrow's meeting? To see you, to assess whether you're truly worth House Thorne's protection, or whether I've grown sentimental in my old age. A bitter smile touched his mouth. They'll probably offer to take you off my hands, frame it as mercy, as relieving me of an unnecessary burden. And if you refuse, then they'll know you matter. And anything that matters can be used as leverage. Cassian crossed to her, and his hand rose slowly to her face, not touching, just hovering near her cheek. They'll try to frighten you, say things designed to make you run, to make you beg me to send you away. You must not react. No fear, no tears, no visible emotion. How? Elara's voice cracked. How am I supposed to stand in a room with creatures who see me as food and show nothing? By remembering that I'll be there, that House Thorne's laws protect you, that you are not alone. His hand finally made contact, just fingertips against her jaw, cool and gentle. And by trusting that I've survived 3 centuries of vampire politics, by knowing exactly how to play this game. The touch sent a shiver through her, not fear, but something more complicated. She could smell him now, that strange combination of old parchment and night-blooming flowers, could feel the unnatural stillness of his body, the way he didn't breathe, the way living things breathed. He was so close, so dangerous, and yet her instincts, which should be screaming, had gone strangely quiet. Why does it matter? She whispered. Why not just let me go? Find another mortal to protect? One less complicated? Cassian's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and his eyes were infinitely sad. Because I'm tired, Elara. Tired of watching mortals break under the weight of our world. Tired of being surrounded by servants who fear me too much to be honest. Tired of the loneliness that comes from living so long that everyone becomes temporary. He dropped his hand. You flinched when I reached for you, and something in me woke up, remembered why I took the blood oath in the first place, centuries ago, to protect the vulnerable. Elara said quietly. Yes. He stepped back, breaking the moment. So tomorrow, you'll stand beside me in that parlor. You'll look House Vesper's heir in the eye. You'll show them that House Thorne's protection means something. His voice hardened. And you'll survive it, because I won't allow any alternative. Elara straightened her spine, lifting her chin. Then teach me everything. Every rule, every gesture, every word. I need to know. I won't be the weakness that brings down House Thorne. Something fierce and approving flashed in Cassian's eyes. Good. We have until sunset tomorrow. Let's begin. They worked through the night, Cassian demonstrating courtly gestures, teaching her the hierarchy of vampire houses, explaining the subtle language of glances and pauses that carried weight in immortal society. He was patient when she stumbled, relentless when she tried to excuse her failures, and occasionally, when she managed something correctly, almost gentle in his praise. As dawn approached, Elara's exhaustion finally caught up with her. She swayed on her feet, and Cassian caught her elbow instantly. Enough. You need rest. He guided her toward the stairs. Sleep today. Tomorrow evening, we face House Vesper together. At the door to her chambers, Elara turned back. Cassian? Why do you stay here? In this house, in this city? With all your power, you could go anywhere. He was silent for a long moment, lamplight casting his face in sharp relief. Because someone has to hold the line, he said finally. Someone has to remember that humans are people, not prey. If House Thorne falls, if our laws are abandoned, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. Elara understood. She was standing beside the last barrier between civilization and something much darker. Then we won't let it fall, she said. Cassian's smile was small but genuine. Sleep well, little ward. The real test begins tomorrow. The door closed between them, and Elara leaned against it, her heart still racing from hours in his presence, from lessons in survival, from the growing understanding that she'd stepped into a war that had been brewing for centuries, and that somehow, impossibly, she might matter to its outcome. Chapter 5. The envoy. Elara woke to find a dress laid across the foot of her bed, deep emerald silk, the color of forest shadows at midnight. The bodice was structured with delicate embroidery, thorns and roses intertwined in silver thread. House Thorne's crest, she realized. A statement. Mrs. Aldrich arrived as the sun began its descent, her face grave. His lordship requests you wear this. And these. She held out a velvet box. Inside lay a necklace of silver and moonstone, clearly antique, clearly valuable. They belonged to his grandmother, the last mortal to be formally recognized by House Thorne as family. Elara's fingers trembled as she touched the stones. Family? She married into the house 3 centuries ago, before the laws changed, bore 2 mortal children before accepting the gift of immortality. Mrs. Aldrich's voice softened. Lord Cassian was fond of her. She taught him that humans could be more than food or servants, could be equals, partners. She's been dust for 200 years, but he's never forgotten. The weight of that history settled on Elara's shoulders as Mrs. Aldrich helped her dress. The gown fit perfectly, the necklace cold against her throat. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, no longer a servant, not quite a lady. Something undefined and dangerous. Cassian waited in the entrance hall as she descended the grand staircase. He'd dressed formally, black coat with silver buttons, white cravat, dark trousers that belonged to another century. His hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression: surprise, approval, something deeper he quickly masked. You look like her, he said quietly. My grandmother. Same defiance in the eyes. Before Elara could respond, the clock struck 7, and the doorbell chimed. The sound echoed through the hall like a death knell. Cassian's posture shifted subtly, shoulders back, face smoothing into aristocratic coldness. He extended his arm to her. Remember everything I taught you. Don't speak unless directly addressed. Hold their gaze. Show no fear. His voice dropped. And stay within arm's reach of me, always. Elara placed her hand on his arm, feeling the unnatural coolness through his sleeve. Together, they walked toward the parlor, where Mrs. Aldrich was already opening the doors to their guests. 3 figures entered. The first was a woman, tall, angular, with bone-white hair piled in elaborate curls. Her gown was crimson silk that moved like liquid blood, and her eyes were the color of garnets. She moved with a predator's fluid grace, each step deliberate. Behind her came 2 men. One was broad-shouldered and silent, clearly a guard. The other was younger in appearance, perhaps 30, Immortal, years, with dark hair and features that would have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his smile. Lord Cassian. The woman's voice was silk over steel. How kind of you to receive us on such short notice, Lady Vesper. Cassian's bow was precisely measured, respectful but not submissive. Your request for an audience was noted. May I present my ward, Miss Elara Ashford. Lady Vesper's garnet eyes fixed on Elara like a hawk spotting prey. Every instinct screamed to look away, to drop her gaze, to show proper deference to something so obviously powerful. Elara held her stare. 1 second, 2, 5, 10. A small smile touched Lady Vesper's crimson lips. Interesting. She has fire. She glided closer, circling Elara slowly. Tell me, child, do you understand what you've walked into? I understand. I'm under House Thorne's protection, my lady. Elara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Protection. Lady Vesper tasted the word like wine. Such a pretty concept. But protection requires resources, time, attention, blood oaths that bind and constrain. She stopped directly in front of Elara, close enough that her cold breath touched Elara's face. One wonders what a mortal could possibly offer in return to justify such expenditure. The younger man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Perhaps Lord Cassian has grown lonely in his old age. 3 centuries is a long time to live by dusty rules and antiquated morals. My son, Adrian, Lady Vesper gestured negligently. Forgive his directness. Youth makes one tactless. Cassian's hand moved to the small of Elar's back, a subtle claim, a warning to the others. Miss Ashford's value is not your concern, Lady Vesper. I invited you here as courtesy demands, but let us not pretend this is a social call. What do you want? The pleasantries dropped like a discarded mask. Lady Vesper's smile sharpened. The Eastern Territories. 3 blocks along the river where our hunting grounds border yours. Your feeding contracts there have lapsed, the donors moved away, died, relocated. Empty territory serves no purpose. Cede them to House Vesper, and we'll consider this situation resolved. By situation, you mean my ward. I mean your unprecedented decision to elevate Immortal to family status. It's caused talk, Cassian. Uncomfortable questions about whether House Thorne still has the strength to maintain its territories. Lady Vesper's eyes glittered. Give us the eastern blocks. In return, we'll stop asking those questions. Elar's mind raced. 3 blocks of feeding rights, 3 blocks of humans who would fall under House Vesper's control. Humans who would be hunted, not fed from by consent. Cassian had explained the difference last night, and it chilled her blood. Cassian's voice was ice. No. Adrian stepped forward, his handsome face twisting. You'd protect one mortal girl over strategic territory? Over peace between our houses? I'd protect the principle that House Thorne's protection means something. That our blood oaths aren't negotiable based on political pressure. Cassian's hand pressed firmer against Elar's back. The Eastern Territories remain ours. This conversation is finished. Lady Vesper's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You're making a mistake. The other houses are watching. House Corvus, House Blackwell, they're asking why Cassian Thorne wastes power on mortal sentiment. How long before they see weakness where you see principle? Let them look. They'll find House Thorne as strong as ever, will they? Adrian moved closer to Elara, ignoring Cassian's warning growl. Or will they find a lord so distracted by a pretty face that he's forgotten how to rule? His hand shot out, faster than mortal sight, reaching for Elar's throat. Cassian moved faster. One moment Adrian was reaching. The next, he was on the floor. Cassian's hand wrapped around his throat, lifting him effortlessly. The guard moved, but Lady Vesper raised one finger, stopping him cold. Touch her again, Cassian said softly, and I'll invoke the right of blood challenge. Your son's life against mine, witnessed by all 4 houses. Is that what you want, Vivian? The use of her first name, intimate, insulting, made Lady Vesper's eyes flash red. But she maintained her composure, waving a hand at Cassian dismissively. Release him. It was a test. One he failed. She looked at her son with contempt as Cassian dropped him. Adrian scrambled back, coughing. It seems the girl knows to stay close to her protector. And you, old friend, still have your speed. This isn't a game. Cassian's voice was deadly quiet. Elara is under my protection by blood oath. Threatening her is threatening me directly. The laws are clear. Laws written by your grandfather. Laws the other houses grow tired of following. Lady Vesper adjusted her gloves with deliberate care. The world changes, Cassian. Even immortals must adapt or be swept away. She moved toward the door, her son and guard following. At the threshold, she paused. You have 1 month to reconsider. After that, House Vesper will petition the Night Council for redistricting. We'll see how the other houses vote when asked to choose between ancient law and practical necessity. They'll uphold the law, will they? Lady Vesper's smile was poison and silk. 3 centuries ago, perhaps. But you're the last lord who remembers why those laws were written. The rest of us simply see chains. Her eyes found Elara one last time. Enjoy your protection, little mortal. While it lasts. Then they were gone. And the parlor felt suddenly empty, suddenly safe. Though Elara's heart still hammered against her ribs, Cassian released her immediately, stepping away as if her nearness burned. His hands were shaking, barely visible, but there. When he spoke, his voice was strained. You did well. Better than I hoped. He moved to the window, keeping his back to her. But this is only the beginning. Lady Vesper doesn't make empty threats. In 1 month, we'll face the Night Council, and I'll have to defend House Thorne's laws before the other houses. If they vote against us, what happens if they vote against us? Cassian's shoulders tensed. Then the blood oath binding me to protect you becomes void, and House Vesper will be free to do whatever they wish. The words settled like stones in Elara's stomach. She crossed to him, stood at his shoulder, looking out at the darkening gardens. Then we have a month to prepare, to find allies among the other houses. To make sure the vote goes our way, Elara, you said I'm not alone. That House Thorne protects its own. She touched his arm gently. Then let me help. Teach me everything about the Night Council. Let me prove I'm worth the risk you're taking. Cassian finally turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. You don't understand what you're offering. The council convenes in the catacombs beneath the old cathedral. 4 houses, their heirs, their most powerful members all in one place. If even one decides you're more trouble than you're worth, then you'll protect me. Like you promised. Elara lifted her chin. I'm not running, Cassian. Not from Lady Vesper, not from the council, not from any of this. You woke something in me to remember that I'm more than a victim of circumstance. I won't go back to being helpless. For a long moment, Cassian simply looked at her. Then slowly, he reached up and touched the moonstone necklace at her throat. My grandmother said something similar. 3 centuries ago, when my grandfather offered her immortality, his smile was sad. She said, I'd rather burn bright for a moment than fade slowly into nothing. What did she choose? She burned. His hand dropped. And then she chose to keep burning forever. He stepped back, composing himself. 1 month, Elara. We have 1 month to prepare you for the Night Council, to secure allies, to prove House Thorne's laws still matter. His eyes hardened with determination. And we start tonight, Chapter 6. The Bondi nights blurred together. Cassian was relentless in his teaching. Every evening after sunset, Elara found herself in the library, the parlor, the ballroom learning the intricate dance of vampire politics. He taught her the subtle language of house crests, the hierarchy of bows and greetings, the deadly significance of seating arrangements at formal gatherings. House Corvus values commerce above all else. He explained one night, pointing to maps spread across the mahogany table. Approach them with business logic. Show them that upholding the old laws maintains stability, and stability protects profits. They'll listen to economic arguments when they ignore moral ones. Elara memorized it all: names, territories, ancient grudges between bloodlines. But it was the quiet moments between lessons that unsettled her most, the way Cassian paused when passing her in corridors, as if fighting the urge to speak, the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he'd caught her when she'd stumbled on the library stairs, his arms wrapping around her with impossible gentleness. And they'd stood frozen for 3 heartbeats before he'd released her with a muttered apology. Something was shifting between them. Something neither of them acknowledged aloud. On the 12th night, Cassian brought her to the estate's oldest wing, a section she'd never entered even as a servant. The corridors here were narrower, the stone walls bare of decoration. He stopped before a heavy oak door bound in iron. This was my grandfather's study. No one has entered since his final death 200 years ago. His hand rested on the door. But there's something inside you need to see. The room beyond was a time capsule. Dust lay thick on every surface, but the furniture remained pristine: a massive desk, leather chairs, shelves packed with books and scrolls. And on the walls, portraits. Elara moved closer to the largest painting. It showed a man who could have been Cassian's twin, same sharp features, same silver eyes, standing beside a woman in an emerald gown. She was mortal, clearly, with warm brown skin and kind eyes that seemed to look directly at Elara across the centuries. Your grandmother. Elara whispered. Her name was Eleanor. Cassian stood beside her, gazing at the portrait. She was a merchant's daughter when my grandfather met her. Quick-minded, fearless, absolutely unsuited to the life of a vampire's companion. He offered her wealth, protection, anything she desired if she'd simply accept her place as a kept mortal. She refused. What did she want? Equality, a voice in house decisions, the right to learn vampire law and speak at councils. Cassian's voice held something like a. She demanded he teach her everything: our history, our weaknesses, our politics. And when he finally agreed, she became the most formidable political mind in House Thorne. Even the other houses respected her. Elara studied the painted face. She looks happy. She was. For 70 years as a mortal, and then 2 centuries more after accepting immortality. She and my grandfather rewrote half our house laws together. He turned to face Elara. The blood oath I swore to protect you? She wrote it. The feeding consent laws? Her work. Everything House Thorne stands for: the belief that mortals deserve dignity and choice began with her. The weight of that legacy pressed down on Elara. Why are you telling me this? Cassian moved to the desk, running his fingers through the dust. Because in 3 weeks, I'll stand before the Knight Council and defend these laws. And I want you to understand what we're fighting for, not just your safety, but everything Eleanor built. Everything she believed humans could be. He looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath. You remind me of her. That same fire. That same refusal to be diminished. Elara's throat tightened. I'm not brave like her. I'm terrified every moment. She was terrified too. But she acted anyway. Cassian crossed to her slowly, giving her time to retreat. She didn't. Elara, there's something I need to tell you. About the Knight Council. The gravity in his voice made her stomach drop. What is it? If the vote goes against us, if they rule that my blood oath is invalid, he stopped, jaw tightening. Lady Vesper will claim you. By law, she'd have that right. Any mortal denied house protection becomes available to the first house that claims them. And Vesper doesn't take wards. They take property. The word hung between them like a blade. Then we make sure the vote doesn't go against us, Elara said, lifting her chin despite the fear coursing through her. There's another option. Cassian's hand rose slowly, cupping her face with careful gentleness. I could offer you immortality. Tonight, if you're one of us, part of House Thorne by blood, not just oath. The council has no authority. You'd be beyond their reach. Elara's heart hammered. You mean, turn me into a vampire? Yes. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, his touch achingly tender. It's not a gift I offer lightly. Immortality is beautiful and terrible in equal measure. You'd gain centuries but lose sunlight, gain strength, but need blood to survive. You'd be bound to House Thorne forever, and to you. Something raw flickered in his eyes. Yes, to me. Maker and offspring are connected. You'd feel my emotions, my presence, as I'd feel yours. It's intimate in ways mortals can't understand. Some describe it as a kind of chains, others as communion. Elara searched his face, this ancient creature who'd become so much more than her lord, so much more than her protector. What do you want me to choose? I want you safe. The words came out strained, as if forced past some internal barrier. I want you beyond Lady Vesper's reach. But I also want. He stopped, closing his eyes briefly. I want it to be your choice, not made from fear or desperation, but because you truly wish it. Eleanor waited 70 years before accepting immortality. She wanted to live as a mortal first, to know what she'd be giving up. We don't have 70 years. We have 3 weeks. I know. Cassian's hand dropped from her face, and he stepped back. Think about it. If you choose mortality, I'll defend you before the council with everything I have. If you choose immortality, his voice softened, I'll make sure the transformation is as gentle as possible. That you wake into this life with someone who cares whether you survive it. Elara's mind spun. Immortality. The word itself felt impossibly large, impossible to grasp. To live forever, to never age, to become something other than human. To be bound to Cassian, not just by protection, but by blood itself. How much time do I have to decide? Until the council convenes. 3 weeks. Cassian moved toward the door, then paused. Elara, whatever you choose, know that I won't abandon you. Mortal or immortal, you have my protection. That doesn't change. After he left, Elara stood alone in the dusty study, staring at Eleanor's portrait. The painted eyes seemed to hold understanding, even sympathy. What would you choose? Elara asked the silent image. If you had 3 weeks instead of 70 years? The portrait, of course, didn't answer. The next week passed in a strange, suspended tension. Elara threw herself into learning. But now every lesson carried additional weight. Cassian taught her vampire physiology, the way they healed, the way sunlight burned, the complex relationship between blood and consciousness. He explained the transformation process in clinical detail, never pressuring, always giving her space to ask questions. But beneath the lessons, something else grew, small touches that lingered too long, conversations that stretched past midnight, veering from politics into philosophy, into personal histories neither had shared before. The way Cassian watched her practice her courtly bow, his expression unguarded for just a moment, the way Elara found herself seeking his presence even when no lesson was scheduled. One night, she found him in the music room, a space she'd never seen him use. He sat at a grand piano, his fingers moving over keys that hadn't been played in years, coaxing out a melody that sounded like morning and hope intertwined. He stopped when she entered. I didn't mean to interrupt, Elara said. You're not. He gestured to the bench beside him. My grandfather taught me this piece. Said it was Eleanor's favorite. Elara sat, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his body. "Will you play it?" He did. The music filled the room like living grief, like beauty that hurt to hear. When the final notes faded, Cassian's hands remained on the keys, and Elara saw his carefully maintained composure crack just slightly. "I'm tired of losing people," he said quietly. 3 centuries of watching humans age and die. Servants, friends, the few mortals I've cared for gone in what feels like moments. I thought I'd learn to keep distance, to protect myself by never caring too much. His eyes met hers. "And then you flinched when I reached for you, and all those careful walls came crashing down." Elara's hand moved to his on the piano keys, warm flesh against cold stone. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. You should be." But he didn't pull away. "I'm a predator, Elara. Immortal, dangerous, bound by hungers you can't understand. Getting close to me is my choice to make." She turned his hand over, tracing the lines of his palm. "You've given me more choices in 3 weeks than I've had in years. Don't take this one away." Cassian stared at their joined hands, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "If you choose mortality, and the council votes against us, I don't know if I can bear watching Vesper take you. Don't know if I'm strong enough to let you go. Then teach me to fight. Teach me to survive even without the blood oath. Make me strong enough that no house can claim me easily." His fingers tightened on hers. "That's what Eleanor said, word for word, the night she demanded my grandfather teach her to use a blade." They sat in silence, hands intertwined, the weight of decision hanging between them. Outside, the moon climbed higher, marking time they didn't have, counting down to a council meeting that would determine everything. And in that moment, Elara realized she'd already made her choice. Not about immortality, that question still churned in her mind, but about Cassian, about trusting him, about believing that whatever happened in 3 weeks, she wouldn't face it alone. "Teach me," she said firmly. "Everything. Not just politics and protocol. Teach me how to survive in your world, mortal or not." Cassian's smile was slight but genuine. "Then we start tomorrow." "And Elara?" He raised their joined hands, pressing his cold lips to her knuckles in a gesture both formal and intimate. "Thank you for not running. Most would have. You said that before. I meant it both times." He released her hand and returned to the piano, playing another melody, this one less mournful, almost hopeful. Elara listened until dawn threatened, until Cassian had to retreat to whatever place he spent the dangerous daylight hours, and as she climbed to her chambers, she touched the moonstone necklace at her throat and wondered if Eleanor had felt this same terrifying, exhilarating certainty that some choices, once made, changed everything, that some bonds, once formed, couldn't be broken, even by death itself. Chapter 7. The attack. The warning came at dusk. 2 weeks before the council meeting, Elara was in the training room, a converted ballroom where Cassian had begun teaching her defensive techniques. Nothing that would stop a vampire, he'd admitted, but enough to buy seconds. Seconds. That might mean survival. She was practicing the movement he'd shown her, a twist and drop that could break a grip, when Mrs. Aldrich burst through the doors. Her usual composure shattered. "They're here. House Vesper. At the gates." Her voice was tight with controlled panic. "A dozen of them, maybe more. They're demanding entry under the Treaty of Mutual Territory, claiming they've traced a rogue vampire to our grounds." Elara's blood went cold. "Is there a rogue vampire here?" "No." Cassian appeared in the doorway, already moving with predatory speed. He was dressed for violence, dark clothing without ornamentation, his hair pulled back, every line of his body coiled tension. "It's a pretext. They're forcing their way in to test our defenses, to see how far I'll go to protect you." "What do we do?" "You hide." He gripped her shoulders, his eyes blazing. "There's a room in the oldest part of the cellar behind the wine racks, through a passage only House Thorne knows. Mrs. Aldrich will take you there. Lock the door from inside. Don't open it for anyone but me. And if they find me?" "They won't." But his jaw was tight. "I'll keep them occupied. Make them think you've already fled the estate. By the time they realize the deception, dawn will force them to retreat." The sound of shattering glass echoed through the house. Shouts, the scream of wood splintering. They were inside. "Go, now." Cassian shoved her toward Mrs. Aldrich, then turned and vanished into the corridor with inhuman speed. A moment later, Elara heard his voice ring out, cold and commanding. "By what right do you violate House Thorne's sanctuary?" Mrs. Aldrich's grip on Elara's wrist was iron. "Come, quickly. We don't have much time." They ran through servant corridors Elara barely recognized, down spiraling stairs that seemed to descend forever. Behind them, crashes and shouts echoed, furniture overturning, doors slamming, Cassian's voice raised in fury she'd never heard from him. The cellar was vast and dark, lined with wine racks that stretched into shadow. Mrs. Aldrich moved with surprising speed for her age, pulling aside a particular rack to reveal a narrow opening in the stone wall. Through here. Follow the passage to its end. There's a room with an iron door. Lock it behind you. Don't come out until Lord Cassian himself calls for you. She pressed a small blade into Elara's hand. Silver won't kill a vampire, but it burns them. Use it if you must. What about you? I've weathered house wars before, girl. I'll survive this one. Mrs. Aldrich's expression softened briefly. He cares for you, more than is wise. Don't make me regret helping him protect you. Then she was gone, and Elara was alone in the darkness. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, the walls pressing close on either side. Elara moved forward with her hands outstretched, feeling her way through the pitch black. Water dripped somewhere ahead. The air smelled of earth and old stone and something else, something ancient that made her skin crawl. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, her hands found iron, a door, just as Mrs. Aldrich had said. Elara fumbled for the handle, pushed through, and found herself in a small chamber lit by a single oil lamp that someone had left burning. The room was sparse: a cot, a table, water, and dried food stores. A refuge prepared for exactly this scenario. Elara locked the iron door with trembling hands and leaned against it, trying to slow her racing heart. Above, the sounds of conflict continued. Crashes that shook dust from the ceiling. Cassian's voice, then others: Lady Vesper's silk-smooth tones, Adrian's sneering responses. They were tearing the house apart, room by room, looking for her. Elara gripped the silver blade and waited. Time lost meaning in the underground dark. Minutes stretched into hours. The sounds above grew more distant, then closer, then distant again. At one point, she heard footsteps in the passage outside her door, slow, deliberate, searching. I can smell your fear. Little mortal, Adrian's voice, muffled by the iron. Mortality has such a distinctive scent. Like flowers before they rot. Elara pressed herself against the far wall, blade raised, not breathing. Lord Cassian thinks he's so clever, hiding you in his grandfather's old bolt hole. But House Vesper has long memories. We know all about Eleanor's refuge. A pause. Though I'll admit, the iron door is new. Grandfather must have reinforced it before his final death. The handle rattled. Once, twice. Interesting. Locked from the inside, which means you're in there right now, listening, terrified. Adrian's laugh was cold. I could break this door given time. Iron is strong, but not strong enough against 3-century-old vampire fury. The question is, would I reach you before Cassian reached me? Elara's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the blade. My mother thinks you're leverage, a weakness to exploit. But I think you're something more interesting. His voice dropped lower, intimate. I think you're the first thing Cassian has cared about in centuries. The first crack in his perfect, controlled facade. And cracks, dear mortal, are where empires fall. Silence. Then footsteps retreating. Sleep well, little ward. We'll see each other again soon. At the council, perhaps. Or sooner, if my mother decides patience no longer suits her purposes. Then he was gone. And Elara was alone, with the sound of her own frantic breathing and the slow drip of water somewhere in the darkness. She didn't know how long she waited. Long enough for her legs to ache from standing. Long enough for the sounds above to finally cease. Long enough that she began to fear dawn had come and gone, that something had happened to Cassian, that she was trapped down here with no way to know if the danger had passed. Then 3 knocks on the iron door. A pause. 3 more knocks. Elara. Cassian's voice, strained, but unmistakably his. It's safe. Let me in. She fumbled with the lock, hands numb, and the door swung open. Cassian stood in the passage, and even in the lamplight she could see he'd been in a fight. His shirt was torn, splattered with blood, whether his or someone else's she couldn't tell. A cut on his cheekbone was already healing, the flesh knitting itself back together. But his eyes blazed with something beyond anger, beyond fear. Something that looked almost like desperation. Are you hurt? His hands were on her shoulders, her face, checking for injuries with frantic thoroughness. Did they reach you? Did anyone? I'm fine. Adrian found the passage. but the door held. Elara's voice cracked. Cassian, what happened up there? They tore through half the house looking for you. Violated every room, destroyed furniture, interrogated the servants. I kept them occupied as long as I could, but, he stopped, jaw clenching. Lady Vesper made it clear this was only a warning. Next time, they won't ask permission. Next time, they'll come in force. The council meeting is 2 weeks away. They're gambling. I won't risk open war before then. Cassian's hands tightened on her shoulders. But Elara, if they come again before the council convenes, I won't be able to stop them. Not alone. House Vesper brought a dozen vampires tonight. Next time could be twice that. The weight of their situation crashed down on Elara. Then what do we do? Cassian was silent for a long moment, his expression warring with something. Then he seemed to come to a decision. We call in allies. House Corvus owes me a favor from 50 years back. And House Blackwell. There's a possibility, though it's complicated. He pulled her toward the passage. But first, we get you somewhere truly safe. Not the estate, they've proven they can breach it. Somewhere even Lady Vesper won't dare follow. Where? The old cathedral. Neutral ground. Sanctified centuries ago by all for houses. No vampire can spill blood there without facing execution from the council itself. They emerged into the cellar. And Elara saw the destruction: wine racks overturned. Bottles shattered. The floor slick with spilled vintage. We leave tonight. Before they have time to regroup, Elara looked around at the ruins of the home where she'd found unexpected sanctuary. What about the servants? Mrs. Aldrich, the others will be safer without you here. Lady Vesper wants you, not them. Once you're gone, they'll have no reason to return. Cassian's voice was bleak. This is my fault. I brought this war to their doorstep by protecting you. No, Elara grabbed his torn shirt, forcing him to look at her. Lady Vesper brought this war. She could have accepted your refusal. Instead, she chose violence. Don't take responsibility for her cruelty. Something shifted in Cassian's eyes, gratitude, perhaps, or relief at not bearing the guilt alone. He covered her hand with his, cold fingers against warm. We need to move. Dawn is 4 hours away. That gives us enough time to reach the cathedral and secure sanctuary before sunrise. Forces me to ground. He started toward the stairs, then paused. Elara, there's something you should know. The cathedral is where the council will convene. If we go there now, we won't leave until after the vote. 2 weeks in close quarters with increasing pressure from all sides. His eyes held hers. 2 weeks for you to decide about immortality. Because once we're in the cathedral, there's no going back. Whatever choice you make, you'll have to live with it. Elara thought of the destroyed house above them, of Adrian's voice through the door, promising they'd meet again, of Lady Vesper's garnet eyes and cruel smile, of everything she stood to lose and everything she might gain. Then let's not waste time. She squeezed his hand. Take me to the cathedral. We'll face whatever comes next together. Cassian's smile was slight but genuine, the first real smile she'd seen from him all night. Together. I like the sound of that. They climbed from the cellars into the ruined house, moving quickly through shadows and broken furniture. Mrs. Aldrich met them at the servants' entrance. A travel bag already packed. Everything you'll need, my lord, including the documents for sanctuary request. She pressed the bag into his hands, then turned to Elara. Be strong, girl. Remember, Eleanor survived 3 house wars and came out the other side. You have that same strength. Use it. Then they were out in the night, moving through gardens toward the estate's hidden gate, leaving behind the only home Elara had known for months, leaving behind everything familiar, walking toward a future that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. And beside her, cold hand wrapped around hers, walked an ancient vampire who'd somehow become the only certainty she had left. Chapter 8. Sanctuary Cathedral rose from the city's heart like a stone, prayer ancient spires piercing the night sky. Stained glass windows dark as closed eyes. Elara had passed it 100 times as a servant running errands, but she'd never truly looked at it. Never noticed the symbols carved into every archway. Never seen how the shadows seemed to pool differently here. As if the darkness itself respected this ground, Cassian moved toward the main entrance with purposeful strides, his hands still wrapped around hers. The massive oak doors stood open despite the late hour, and warm light spilled onto the stone steps. Sanctuary is an old rite, he explained quietly, dating back to when the 4 houses first formed their pact. Any vampire or their protected mortals can claim refuge here for a period not exceeding 1 moon cycle. During that time, they cannot be harmed, hunted, or removed by force, even by other houses. Especially by other houses. The cathedral is neutral ground. Break that neutrality, and the other 3 houses will unite to destroy the offender. They climb the steps. It's the only law all vampires agree on, that some places must remain untouched by our wars. Inside, the cathedral was vast and silent. Rows of pews stretched toward a distant altar, and above, vaulted ceilings soared into shadow. Candles burned in iron sconces, their flames steady despite the lack of wind. The air smelled of incense and old stone and something else, something that made Ilara's skin prickle with recognition of ancient power. A figure emerged from the shadows near the altar. He was old, or at least appeared so. White hair fell past his shoulders, and his face was lined with what might have been age, or simply centuries of careful expression. He wore robes of deep gray, and his eyes, when they found Cassian, were the pale gold of autumn leaves. Lord Thorne. His voice carried perfectly across the empty space. It has been some time since you last sought the cathedral's protection. 20 years? 30? 53, Father Dominic. Cassian bowed, a gesture of respect Elara hadn't seen him offer anyone. I seek sanctuary under the old laws. For myself and my ward, Miss Elara Ashford. For the period leading to the council convening, Father Dominic's golden eyes shifted to Elara, and she felt the weight of his gaze, assessing, measuring, seeing far more than she wanted seen. The mortal who has caused such turmoil among the houses. I've heard the whispers. He moved closer, each step deliberate. House Vesper petitioned me earlier this very evening, claiming you harbor a fugitive, that this girl has committed crimes warranting her surrender to their justice. Elara's heart stuttered, but Cassian's voice remained steady. House Vesper lies. Miss Ashford has committed no crime. She is under my blood oath protection, recognized by House Thorne as family. Lady Vesper wants her only as leverage against our house. His hand tightened on Elara's. I invoke sanctuary under the Pact of Four, witnessed by the cathedral's stones. Will you honor it? The silence stretched. Father Dominic studied them both, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. The cathedral honors all sanctuary requests made in good faith. You may remain here until the council convenes in 14 days' time. He gestured toward a corridor leading off the main chamber. The eastern wing has been prepared. You'll find suitable quarters, their separate chambers, as propriety demands, though connected by a common room. Thank you, Father. Don't thank me yet. Father Dominic's eyes hardened slightly. Sanctuary protects you from violence, Lord Thorne. It does not protect you from politics. The other houses will visit. They'll petition, argue, threaten, seduce, everything short of physical harm. And when the council convenes in this very cathedral, you'll face judgment. He looked at Elara, as will she. The question that will decide your fates is simple. Does one mortal's life outweigh 3 centuries of house law? Choose your arguments carefully. Then he turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving them alone in the candlelit vastness. Cassian exhaled slowly, the first sign of tension releasing. Come. We should settle in before dawn. I have. Perhaps 2 hours before the sun rises. The eastern wing proved surprisingly comfortable. The common room held a fireplace, deep chairs, and shelves lined with books. 2 doors led to separate bedchambers, one fitted with heavy curtains and shutters for daytime protection, the other simpler but adequate. Elara explored her chamber while Cassian secured his own. A bed with clean linens, a washstand, clothing in her size already laid out, someone had prepared for their arrival. Father Dominic, perhaps, or the unseen hands that maintained this sacred space. When she returned to the common room, Cassian stood by the fire, his face turned toward the flames. Without his coat, in shirt sleeves and waistcoat, he looked less like an ancient lord and more like a man exhausted by the weight of impossible choices. We're safe here, he said, without turning. For 2 weeks, at least. Lady Vesper can't touch you. But after the council votes? After the council. He finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. That depends on many things. Whether House Corvus honors their debt, whether House Blackwell can be convinced to support us, whether I can make the other houses understand what's at stake. He crossed to her slowly. And whether you decide to remain mortal or accept immortality before the vote. There it was, the question that had haunted every moment since he'd first offered. Elara moved to the window, looking out at the city's nighttime sprawl. From this height, she could see the territories divided by the four houses, the merchant districts where Corvus ruled, the docks under Blackwell's control, the eastern quarters claimed by Vesper, and the central grounds held by Thorne. "Tell me what it's like," she said quietly. "Immortality. Not the politics or the blood oaths, what it actually feels like to live forever." Cassian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "It's beautiful and terrible in equal measure. You watch the world change, empires fall, technologies bloom, humans achieve wonders you never imagined. But everyone you care for dies. Every mortal connection becomes temporary. You learn to love carefully, if at all, because grief compounds across centuries." He stood beside her at the window. "I've lived 300 years, Elara. I've seen plagues and wars and revolutions. I've lost friends, lovers, everyone who mattered. And the loneliness." He stopped. "The loneliness is a weight that grows heavier with each passing decade. Then why offer it to me? Why share that burden? Because loneliness shared is different than loneliness endured alone." His hand found hers on the windowsill, cold fingers threading through warm. "Because in 3 months, you've reminded me what it feels like to care whether someone lives or dies. To wake each night with purpose beyond mere survival." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I'm selfish enough to want you to stay, even knowing what immortality costs." Elara turned to face him, their hands still joined. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, almost vulnerable. "And if I choose mortality? If I decide 14 days from now to remain human, face the council's judgment, and accept whatever comes, then I'll defend you with everything I have. I'll call in every favor, leverage every alliance, threaten war if necessary." His free hand rose to cup her face. "But Elara, if the vote goes against us, if they rule the blood oath invalid, I won't be able to protect you from what follows. Lady Vesper will claim you, and I'll be powerless to stop it without breaking the very laws I've spent centuries upholding. So, my choices are immortality or trusting that I'm persuasive enough to convince 3 other houses that mortal dignity matters." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I wish I could offer certainty, but all I have is my word that I'll fight for you. Mortal or immortal, you have that." Elara leaned into his touch, this impossible man who'd somehow become essential to her survival, to her sense of self. "I need time to think, to understand what I'd be choosing. 2 weeks feels like both forever and not nearly enough. Then take the time you need. I'll answer any question, teach you everything about immortality that I can." He smiled slightly. "Though I should warn you, I'm not the best advertisement. 3 centuries of accumulated cynicism tends to color one's perspective." "I don't know." Elara managed a small smile. "You've been fairly tolerable for a centuries-old predator." His laugh was surprised and genuine. "Tolerable. High praise indeed." But his expression sobered quickly. "Elara, whatever you choose, know this. You've already changed House Thorne. Changed me. Even if," his voice caught, "even if the worst happens, you'll have mattered. Left a mark on this world deeper than most mortals manage in entire lifetimes." The weight of his words settled around her like a cloak. Outside the window, the first hint of pre-dawn gray touched the horizon. Cassian noticed it immediately, his body tensing. "I need to retire. Sunrise comes quickly." He released her reluctantly. "Try to rest. Tomorrow night, we'll begin preparing for the council properly. And Elara," he paused at the door to his chamber, "thank you for trusting me this far. For not running when you had every reason to. You've said that before too, and I'll probably say it again." His smile was soft. "Good night, Elara. Or rather good morning." The door closed behind him, and Elara heard the heavy shutters being secured, the additional locks sliding into place. Protection against the sun that would kill him in moments if it found him unguarded. She returned to the window and watched dawn break over the city, golden light painting rooftops, warming stone, bringing the mortal world to life. In 2 weeks, she'd face the council. In 2 weeks, she'd have to decide whether to see another sunrise or trade daylight for forever. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt strangely calm. As if standing here in sanctuary, suspended between her mortal life and an immortal future, was exactly where she needed to be. As if the choice, when it came, would be obvious, even if she didn't yet know which way she'd choose. Behind her, in his lightless chamber, Cassian slept the deep sleep of vampires vulnerable, trusting her to keep watch. And Elara stood guardian over his rest, watching the sunrise. and wondered what it would be like to never see this again. To trade gold and warmth for starlight and shadow. To trade the fleeting beauty of mortality for the endless weight of forever. The sun climbed higher, and Elara finally turned from the window to rest. 2 weeks, 14 days to decide the shape of her entire existence. She'd spent 3 months learning to survive in Cassian's world. Now, she had 14 days to decide if she wanted to live in it forever. Chapter 9. The choice. Days in sanctuary blurred together in a strange rhythm. Elara's mortal schedule in verse to match Cassian's nocturnal existence. She slept through mornings, woke at noon to study the documents he left for her, and waited for sunset, when he'd emerge from his chamber and the real work would begin. The other houses came. Just as Father Dominic had warned, House Corvus sent their heir, a sharp-eyed woman named Vera who spoke of economics and stability, who argued that supporting House Thorne's outdated sentimentality would destabilize centuries of profitable peace. Cassian countered with reminders of old debts, of times when House Thorne had protected Corvus' interests when no one else would. House Blackwell's representative was more direct, a scarred vampire named Marcus, who'd survived 2 house wars and looked like he'd start a third if given reason. But he listened when Cassian spoke of honor, of the principle that oaths once sworn must hold weight, or else what separated them from monsters. And Lady Vesper came herself. 3 nights before the council vote, she swept into the cathedral's common room like wind-given form, Adrian trailing behind her. Elara sat in a chair near the fire, Cassian standing at her shoulder, a united front they'd carefully rehearsed. How domestic. Lady Vesper's crimson lips curved. The ancient lord and his mortal pet, playing house in the cathedral. Do you take tea together? Discuss the weather? We discuss the future of house law, Cassian replied coolly. Something you've shown remarkably little interest in preserving, because your laws are chains, Cassian, written by your grandfather's generation to assuage their guilt over what they'd become. She circled the room like a predator testing boundaries. The world has changed. Humans breed like cattle, fill every corner of the earth. Why should we limit ourselves to feeding from willing donors when sustenance walks freely through our streets? Because we agreed. Cassian's voice was ice. 4 houses, 1 pact. We would rule the night, but honor mortal dignity. Break that agreement, and you invite chaos, humans hunting us, governments mobilizing against us, the careful balance we've maintained for centuries collapsing, or perhaps we finally claim what's rightfully ours. Adrian stepped forward, his handsome face twisted with contempt. Our power, our superiority. Instead of begging scraps from mortals too frightened to refuse, Elara had remained silent through most of these visits, playing the part of quiet ward. But something in Adrian's tone, the casual cruelty, the assumption that human lives held no value, broke her careful control. Is that what you think? She stood, meeting Adrian's gaze directly. That fear is the same as consent? That terror makes for willing donors? Elara. Cassian's warning hand touched her shoulder, but she didn't look away. No. I want to understand. She faced Lady Vesper. You're immortal, powerful beyond mortal comprehension. You've lived centuries, seen empires rise and fall, and with all that time, all that power, the best you can imagine is reducing humans to prey? That's not strength, that's the same brutality that's plagued mortal kingdoms since time began. Just wearing a prettier face. The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Vesper stared at her, garnet eyes unreadable. Then slowly, she began to laugh, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and dangerous. Oh, she has fire. I see why you keep her, Cassian. She moved closer to Elara, and Cassian's hand tightened on her shoulder. Tell me, girl, if we're such monsters, why are you still here? Why not flee while you had the chance? Why stand beside a predator and defend his antiquated principles? Elara's throat was dry, but she forced the words out. Because he's proven that immortality doesn't require monstrosity, that power can be wielded with honor. And because someone needs to remind you what you've forgotten across your centuries, that human lives matter. That we're not resources to be consumed, but people deserving of dignity and choice. Pretty speech, Adrian sneered. Let's see how it holds up when the council votes against you. When my mother claims you, and teaches you exactly what House Vesper thinks of mortal dignity. Enough, Cassian's voice cracked like a whip. You've made your position clear, Lady Vesper. The council will decide in 3 days. Until then, I'd appreciate you respecting sanctuary and leaving us in peace. Lady Vesper held his gaze for a long moment, then inclined her head, not quite respect, but acknowledgement. 3 days, old friend. I hope you've prepared compelling arguments. The other houses grow weary of your moral grandstanding. Her eyes flicked to Elara one last time. And I hope you've said your goodbyes to Sunlight Girl. One way or another, your mortal life ends when the council convenes. Then they were gone. And Elara sagged against Cassian's steadying arm, her brief courage crumbling into shaking relief. That was foolish, Cassian murmured, but his voice held something like pride. Admirable but foolish. Adrian would have struck you if Father Dominic hadn't been in the cathedral. I couldn't just sit there and let them talk about humans like we're nothing. I know. He guided her back to the chair, kneeling before her so their eyes were level. That's exactly what Eleanor would have done. Exactly the same fire, the same refusal to be diminished. His hands framed her face. But Elara, Lady Vesper wasn't wrong. In 3 days, you'll face the council. If they vote against us, you'll need to have made your choice: immortality or mortality. There won't be time for hesitation. The weight of it crashed down on her. 3 days, 72 hours to decide the shape of her entire existence. I need to know something, Elara said quietly. If I choose immortality, if I let you turn me, will it change who I am? Will I lose this? She gestured vaguely at herself. This fire you keep praising? Will I become like them, seeing humans as lesser? Cassian was silent for a long moment, his expression troubled. I can't promise you won't change. Immortality alters everyone. Your senses will sharpen, your strength will grow, you'll see the world differently through vampire eyes. His thumbs brushed her cheeks. But Eleanor remained Eleanor for 2 centuries. She never lost her compassion, her fierce defense of mortal rights. The transformation amplifies what's already there, it doesn't erase it. And the bloodlust, the need to feed, is manageable with practice and discipline. You'd feed from willing donors, as House Thorne has done for generations. It's intimate, yes, and initially overwhelming, but not uncontrollable. He hesitated. Though I should be honest, the bond between maker and offspring is intense. You'd feel my emotions. I'd feel yours. We'd be connected in ways that would make separation painful. For centuries, potentially forever, Elara absorbed this, trying to imagine being bound to Cassian for lifetimes. The thought should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt almost right, as if the connection they'd built over these months was already the foundation for something deeper. Show me, she whispered, how the transformation works. I need to understand exactly what I'm choosing. Cassian's eyes darkened not with hunger, but with something more complex. He stood, drawing her up with him, and guided her to the window, where moonlight spilled across the floor. The traditional method requires an exchange of blood. I'd drain you nearly to death, not quite, but close enough that your heart barely beats. Then you'd drink from me, taking my blood into your dying body. It's the combination that triggers the transformation, death and immortal blood mixing, remaking you at a fundamental level. His wrist rose between them, pale in the moonlight. It takes 3 days to complete. 3 days of dying and being reborn, of your body changing from mortal to immortal. It's agonizing. From what I understand, every cell restructuring, every sense rewiring. But I'd stay with you through all of it. You wouldn't face it alone. Elara stared at his wrist, at the blue veins visible beneath marble skin. One choice. One decision to end everything she'd been and become something entirely new. And if I choose mortality? Face the council as human? Then I'll defend you with every argument, every alliance, every threat I can muster. If I fail, if they rule against us, I'll break you out of the cathedral before Lady Vesper can claim you. We'll run. Leave this city, this country, if necessary. Find somewhere beyond the 4 houses' reach. His voice roughened. I won't let her have you. Law or no law, I won't. That would make you an outlaw. Strip you of House Thorne, everything you've protected for centuries. Yes, he said it simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. But you'd be free, mortal, human, able to live your life without vampire politics hanging over your head. You could find safety, marry, have children, die of old age surrounded by family. His smile was infinitely sad. Everything I can't give you if you choose immortality. Elara's vision blurred with tears she hadn't realized were falling. Why would you sacrifice everything for me? Because somewhere in the last 3 months, you became more important than ancient laws or house politics, or 3 centuries of carefully maintained neutrality. Cassian's hand found hers, warm and cold, intertwined. Because you make me want to be worthy of the protection I offer. And because he stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Because I've lived 300 years without feeling truly alive, and in 3 months, you've reminded me what it means to care, to hope, to fear loss. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Elara looked at this ancient creature who'd somehow become her sanctuary, her teacher, her unexpected anchor, who'd defended her against his own kind, who'd risked everything for principles most had abandoned, who stood here now offering her impossible choices because he cared whether she survived. And suddenly, standing in moonlight in the cathedral's ancient chamber, the choice became clear. Cassian, her voice was steady now, tears dried, decision made. I want to see the sunrise one more time. Tomorrow morning, before the council convenes. Will you trust me to come back? To not use daylight as an escape? He stared at her for a long moment, reading something in her expression. Yes, I trust you. Then tomorrow night after I've watched the sunrise, after I've said goodbye to that part of myself, she raised his wrist to her lips, pressing a kiss to his pulse point that no longer beat. Tomorrow night, I'll give you my answer. And I need you to promise you'll accept it, whatever I choose. Elara promised me. His jaw clenched, but he nodded. I promise. Whatever you choose, I'll honor it. Good. She released his hand, stepping back. Now, you should rest. 3 days to prepare for the council, and I imagine we'll need every hour. Cassian watched her retreat to her chamber, his expression unreadable. At her doorway, Elara paused and looked back. Cassian, thank you. For everything. For protection, for honesty, for never making this choice simple. It shouldn't be simple, he said quietly. It's your life, mortal or immortal. The most important decision you'll ever make. It deserves complexity. Elara nodded and closed the door between them, leaning against it as her carefully maintained composure finally cracked. She'd made her choice. Tomorrow she'd watch the sunrise one final time and say goodbye to the mortal world, because she'd realized, standing in moonlight, with Cassian's confession hanging in the air, that immortality without him would be lonelier than mortality with him, that some bonds once formed were worth preserving across centuries, that she'd rather burn forever at his side than fade slowly into nothing alone. Tomorrow, she'd give him her answer. Tonight, she'd let herself grieve, for the mortal life she'd never live, for the children she'd never bear, for the simple, human death she was choosing to refuse, and for the sunrise she'd watch for the last time as a creature who still felt warmth. Chapter 10. Forworthy sunrise was more beautiful than Elara remembered. She stood on the cathedral's highest balcony, hands gripping cold stone, watching gold spill across the horizon. The city awakened below, chimney smoke rising, church bells ringing, the everyday miracle of mortal life continuing as it always had. Father Dominic had granted her access to this forbidden space, his golden eyes knowing. Say your farewells properly, he'd said. Whatever you choose tonight will echo through centuries. Elara watched the sun climb higher, feeling warmth on her face, and let herself mourn. Not for the choice itself, she'd made peace with that in the night's quiet hours, but for everything it meant leaving behind. The simple pleasure of sunlight, the possibility of growing old naturally, the thousand small human experiences she'd never know. I'm sorry, she whispered to the dawn, for the life I won't live, for the person I might have been. But she wasn't sorry enough to change her mind. When the sun reached its zenith, Elara finally turned away and descended into shadow. Cassian waited in the common room, pacing like a caged thing. He'd clearly been awake for hours, despite the sun, his face drawn with exhaustion and worry. When Elara entered, he stopped mid-stride. You came back. Relief and something deeper colored his voice. I promised I would. She crossed to him, taking his cold hands in her warm ones. I watched the sunrise, said my goodbyes, and now I'm ready to give you my answer. Cassian's entire body tensed. Elara, before you speak, I need you to know you don't have to choose immortality to stay safe. We can still fight the council, still run if necessary. Don't let fear make this decision. I'm not, she smiled, surprised by her own calm. I'm letting love make it. His breath caught unnecessary for a vampire, but telling nonetheless. I choose immortality, Elara said clearly. Not because I'm afraid of Lady Vesper, or because I want to escape mortality. I choose it, because in 3 months, you've shown me a world worth living in forever. Because you've made me believe that immortality doesn't require losing my humanity, it requires finding someone worth being human with. Her hands tightened on his. I choose forever, Cassian, with you. If you'll have me. For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then he pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers, his body shaking with something that might have been relief or joy or fear of what came next. Are you certain? His voice was raw. Once we begin, there's no turning back. You'll die as a mortal and wake as something else. Something that will live centuries, that will need blood to survive, that will be bound to me in ways you can't fully understand until it happens. I know. And I'm certain. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. When do we start? Now. Before the council convenes tonight. If you're already transforming when they vote, their ruling becomes irrelevant. You'll be House Thorne by blood, not just by oath. Beyond their authority. His hands framed her face. But Elara, the transformation takes 3 days. 3 days of agony. I can't spare you from. I'll be there every moment, but I can't take the pain away. Then don't take it away. Let me feel it. Let me earn this. She turned her head, pressing a kiss to his palm. I'm ready. Cassian drew her to the bedroom. He'd barely used, the one with heavy curtains and reinforced shutters. The bed was already prepared with clean linens and supplies lined a nearby table. Water, cloths, restraints if needed. He'd planned for this possibility, she realized. Had hoped she might choose this path. Lie down, he said gently. Try to relax. The initial draining is disorienting. Elara settled onto the bed, her heart hammering. Cassian sat beside her, his weight barely denting the mattress, and she saw his hands were shaking again. I've never done this before, he admitted. Turn someone. Most of House Thorne's vampires are ancient, turned centuries ago by my grandfather. The responsibility of creating a new immortal, of binding someone to this existence. He stopped, jaw clenching. If something goes wrong, it won't. Elara pulled him down beside her, threading her fingers through his. You're the most careful, controlled person I've ever met. You won't lose control now. His smile was slight but genuine. Your faith in me is terrifying. Good. You should be terrified. It means you'll be careful. She tilted her head, exposing her throat. Now stop stalling and kill me properly. Cassian's laugh was surprised and pained. Only you would face death with humor, but his expression sobered as he leaned over her, his lips brushing her throat where her pulse hammered. I'll try to make this gentle. The draining will take perhaps 10 minutes. You'll feel cold, weak, distant. When your heart barely beats, I'll offer my wrist. Drink until I tell you to stop. Understand? Yes. And Elara. His voice dropped to a whisper. Thank you. For trusting me. For choosing this. For he couldn't finish. I love you too, Elara said quietly. I think I have. Since you defended me against Marcus. Since you looked at my bruises and decided one servant's dignity mattered more than political convenience. Cassian's eyes blazed silver. I love you, he said clearly, as if the words were an oath. Through however many centuries were granted. Remember that when the transformation hurts. When you wonder if you made the right choice. Remember, I love you. Then his fangs descended longer than she'd imagined, sharp as surgical steel, and he struck. The pain was brief, almost sweet. Then came cold. Not the chill of winter, but something deeper, the cold of life draining away, of warmth fleeing towards some distant horizon. Elara's vision dimmed. Her limbs grew heavy. The world receded to a pinpoint of consciousness centered on Cassian's mouth against her throat, drinking steadily, carefully, taking her mortal life in measured increments. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt strangely peaceful, as if this was inevitable. As if every moment of her life had led to this bed, this man, this transformation. When her heart stuttered a weak, irregular flutter, Cassian pulled back. His wrist was already bleeding, torn open by his own fangs. He pressed it to her lips. Drink, he commanded. Drink and live. The blood tasted like iron and night-blooming flowers, and something indefinable, something that sang in her dying veins, that called to parts of herself she'd never known existed. Elara drank, and it was like swallowing starlight, like consuming eternity itself. Power flooded through her fading consciousness. Death and immortal blood colliding, beginning the slow work of transformation. Enough, Cassian finally said, pulling his wrist away. Rest now. Let it work. Elara's eyes drifted closed. The last thing she saw was Cassian's face above her, fierce with love and fear and determination. Then pain arrived, not all at once. but building like a wave starting in her chest where her failing heart struggled, spreading through every vein, every nerve, every cell. Her body was dying and being remade simultaneously, and it hurt worse than anything she'd imagined. She screamed, Cassian's arms wrapped around her, holding her through the convulsions. "I'm here," he murmured against her hair. "I'm here. You're not alone. You'll never be alone again." The pain crescendoed, peaked, then settled into a grinding agony that promised to last for days. But through it all, Cassian held her, spoke to her, reminded her why she'd chosen this, and slowly, impossibly, Elara felt something new emerging from the pain, strength, sharpness, a predator's awareness blooming where mortal senses had been. She was dying. She was being reborn. She was becoming something that would live forever. 3 days later, when the council convened in the cathedral's ancient crypt, Elara Ashford stood beside Cassian Thorne, not as his ward, but as his offspring, as House Thorne's newest vampire, with silver eyes and immortal grace, and the same fierce commitment to protecting mortal dignity that had guided Eleanor 3 centuries before. Lady Vesper's face when she saw Elara, transformed, was worth 3 days of agony. The vote preceded a formality now. Since transformed, vampires fell outside the council's jurisdiction. House Corvus voted to uphold the old laws. House Blackwell followed. Even Lady Vesper, outmaneuvered and furious, couldn't argue against centuries of precedent. House Thorne's principles stood, and afterward, as Elara and Cassian walked through the cathedral gardens under stars that seemed brighter than she remembered, she understood what she'd chosen. What she'd become, forever was a long time, but with Cassian's hand in hers, with House Thorne's laws protecting mortals who couldn't protect themselves, with centuries stretching ahead to make a difference, forever felt exactly right. No regrets? Cassian asked quietly. Elara looked up at the night sky, at the stars she'd never seen so clearly as a mortal. "Only that I didn't choose this sooner." His smile was radiant. "We have time now. Centuries to get it right. Then let's not waste it." She pulled him close, this ancient vampire who'd become her maker, her love, her eternal companion. "Show me everything. Teach me to be worthy of Eleanor's legacy. Help me make House Thorne stronger." Together, Cassian promised, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of blood and moonlight and forever. And somewhere in the cathedral's highest tower, Father Dominic watched the newest vampire of House Thorne walk into her immortal future, and smiled. The old laws would endure. Love had seen to that. The end.